Okay, guys, it is 6:32, and we will be calling this meeting to order. It is the tentative budget meeting. So, if you would, we'd like to welcome everyone and take a moment of silence. And now the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item number 1, review of the agenda. Oh, actually, Brian, are you on here?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Hello.
You want to do your spiel?
Okay.
Hello.
Yeah, we would just note that because of the executive order of the governor declaring this a state of emergency, that would prohibit, given the limitations that are placed on public gatherings, that would limit our ability to meet in a single setting. As a result, we're complying with the governor's order and the attorney general's opinion that was issued by Attorney General Cameron, advising that we can do this by video teleconferencing and that we do not have to have a single point physical facility to operate from. And with that, I'll let you turn it back over to you, Ashley.
Thank you very much. Okay, now, review of the agenda. Item number 1 and number 2, adoption of the agenda.
All right, Ashley, just a quick question there on item number 4, tentative budget. Are the salary schedules assumed to be a part of that tentative budget?
Yes, sir.
Or will we approving the salary schedules along with the tentative budget?
No, I have to build it on something though, and right now I'm going on the assumption that the salary schedules are as presented last week. And then they will be approved at the June meeting per that discussion. And then that will be changed in the working budget.
So I think Mr. Peridot was a good question. So does that imply that we're approving last week's, or are we just approving them for use in the budget and we'll actually address those individually at another point in time?
The salary schedules will be brought back at the June meeting for your discussion and approval to start the year with on July 1.
They're used as we presented them last time just to build the budget at this point, and there still could be changed one way or the other.
I guess my biggest concern in doing that is obviously we're hiring people as we go along, and I'm not really sure in some situations you can tell people their salaries and those type of things just without first approving the salary schedule. I mean, even the budget itself, I mean, I'm not saying it'll happen, and probably 99.9% sure it won't happen, but somebody could come back and say, we want a 2% across the board raise. And then, here we are with this. Seems to me that we should approve an item that accounts for 67% of our budget as presented in the budget report before we decide on the budget.
Can you all hear me now? I'm losing service in and out.
Ashley, you broke up there. Can you repeat what you said?
I'm having trouble. My service is going in and out. I think I'm gonna have to log out and log back on. Sherry, are you on?
I'm here.
I can't hear what they're saying. Can you go forward for a minute?
Sure.
So Alicia, if I understand this, we have the budget tonight, but the salary schedule in June, we can, we may make adjustments to that, or we have the ability to make adjustments. And then anything that is changed in the June meeting, you may have to change the numbers within the budget for next year.
Correct.
Okay.
Can you all hear me, see me?
Yes, we can see you and hear you.
Is that better, Bill?
That's much better.
Okay,
Yes, I can hear you. Yes, thank you.
okay. I don't know what I've missed, so. I know Gordy was talking, I could hear Gordy cutting in and out, so I don't know, did you all want to change, or were we changing something?
I just made a clarification with Alicia that the salary schedules that come up in the June meeting, any changes that we may make to that, then at that point, she may just have to, then any changes, she would have to make adjustments within the budget for next year.
Okay,
Yes, I understand what Mr. Talby's talking about, and I know we can go back and change. It still concerns me that if you're going through the hiring process of not being able to tell your future employee what their salary may be.
Well, we would be operating off the current, we were anticipating no increases, and that's what's built into this. And that's what we would be, the anticipated salary schedule would be. And that's a conversation I would think that we would have with any potential employee, that this is the current salary schedule, then it could be amended, but don't expect that it would be. I don't think they're going to be cut. And at this point, I don't feel that there's probably going to be an increase. And if there were, I don't think they would mind if there was an increase.
So Mr. Christie, quick question. We had a topic last week, I think it was regarding stipends that we tabled. How is that reflected in this budget discussion tonight?
It's not, there's no change because that was just a change that was being recommended from this point, from July going on. If somebody new came into those positions, it does not affect anyone in any of those positions at this time. There is no, it was no decrease. It would reflect no decrease for anyone in those positions at this time. Only a new hire after July 1. And I'm open to have discussion about that. I can tell you reasoning for that when we get to that part of it, when we'd have that discussion, but it does not affect this budget.
We're not addressing that tonight, correct?
No, sir. No, sir.
Okay.
And they're built in exactly like it's on that current schedule, is what they're built in right now, with no change to them.
Alicia, were you trying to talk? Because you're unmuted.
Oh, I'm sorry, no.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Okay. So with that being said, does anyone want to make a motion? Let's see. To adopt the agenda?
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the agenda as presented in our packet.
I'll second that.
Motion by Mr. Heisel, second by Mr. Talby. Okay. District 1,
Yes.
District 2,
Yes.
District 3,
No.
District 4,
Yes.
District 5 is yes. Motion carries 4-1. All right, so item number 1.
I'm sorry,
Sorry.
what did,
No. I'm having to pull my agenda back up. We're on item number 3. Sorry.
Well,
Discussion. Do you have public comments, Paul?
no, I had no one request anything, and I've got Justin with the sign-in sheet at the office, and the office is open. You might ask him if anyone has come in to sign in, but I had nobody today.
Okay,
As of-
Just,
As of 5 minutes ago when I checked, nobody had signed in, but in just a second, I'll mute again and run out there just to be sure. If you don't hear back from me, then nobody.
okay. We'll give him just 1 second. And then we'll move along to item number 3. Okay. Discussion and acknowledgement of City of Winchester Industrial Building. Sorry, I did not get my agenda printed out. Revenue bonds, Series 2020A and Series 2020B. Miss Ellis. Paul Christie.
I think Mr. Eifler, Timothy Eifler with Stroh, Keenan, and Ogden PLLC is on here tonight, and I'd ask him to talk with you. He's already met and talked with the mayor. I think Mr. Eifler, at the time he was the chair, has had some conversation with him. I think it would be best probably for him to, we've done these type things in the past, but I asked him if he could join us tonight to explain what their proposal on this one is. Mr. Eifler?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thanks. Again, I'm Tim Eifler. I'm with Stoll, Keenan, Ogden. Also on the web call here is Stephen Sherman, who works with me. And we both represent a company named Danimer Scientific. They're based out of Georgia. And they decided to locate a pretty substantial project in the city of Winchester. It's over at what used to be the former Alltech facility, and then before that it was Martech Biosciences, and originally it was a brewery, I think, for Coors Brewing. But in any event, they've now purchased that facility, and it's undergoing pretty substantial rehabilitation. Back in 2018, we first met with the city and talked about industrial revenue bond financing, and that's when we met with then Chairman Heisel at the time, and went over this. It all happened fairly quickly, but in August of 2018, the city adopted an inducement resolution agreeing to a bond financing. And basically, what the bond financing does is it provides a property tax abatement during the term of the bonds. So the issue for the school district is obviously that property is there's an abatement on it. It's not in the school district's tax base. So as part of the inducement resolution process, we worked out a pilot arrangement or payment in lieu of tax arrangement with the city of Winchester. And that's what we talked with Chairman Heisel about. But at the time, we didn't talk to the Board of Education as a whole or to the superintendent. So the project's well underway at this point in time, and I'll give you a little overview of what the project is and then kind of where we are today. But basically, the point of today is to explain how the bond works, what it means to the school district, and what's the arrangement on the payment in lieu of taxes. And I do have some good news for you as well on the revenue front relating to the school utility tax. So I'll talk about that at the back end. But basically, the project involves an expenditure at this point in time of about $135 million. Conservatively, it's $121 million, but the bonds go up to $135. But at the end of the day, most of that is manufacturing equipment. The only piece that impacts the school district is the real estate. And the real estate, when it's all said and done, would have a value of about $37 million. So that's the abatement with respect to the school district that we're talking about. The project's going to create 118 new jobs in the city, so it's a very substantial project. And there's an opportunity for further expansion as well. So at this point in time, they've just about finished phase 1 of the project, so they've asked us to go ahead and begin working with the city to issue those bonds. And we're hoping to issue those bonds within the next month or so. through the city of Winchester. So when it comes to the pilot, and we do these all around the state, and everybody's a little bit different kind of on how they work out, but basically the strategy with the school districts is we want to put you in the same net position you would have been in from a revenue standpoint had the bonds not been issued. So we did those calculations and we provided them to Ms. Ellis. And basically, just as a quick background, I won't get into the SEEK form too much, but basically every new dollar of tax revenue that the school district gets, you lose some percentage of that back as a loss in state funding. Because as you become property tax wealthier, you lose that state funding. So there's kind of a net calculation you can make and say, okay, if it's not going to go on the tax rolls, you're not going to lose that state revenue. But you are going to lose the piece, the net that you would have received. And so the calculations and the spreadsheets that we've had, it basically used your most recent SEEK final analysis for the current, the school year that just ended. And the pilot basically says it's 21%. So in the Clark County School District, for every dollar of new tax revenue you receive, you lose 79 cents of state revenue. So your net gain from new revenue is 21 cents. And so what the pilot agreement says is every year the company is going to take its then current assessed value of the property. It's going to take the then current school district tax rate. So whatever rate you levy for that year, calculate what the property tax would have been and remit 21% of that to the school district, which will put you in the same position you would have been in had the bonds not been issued. And what the mayor asked us to do is come back and just explain that, make sure to answer any questions. And what we've asked the superintendent to do is to send a letter that basically says we've explained it and that the district supports the project. That's part of the issuance of the bonds. The other revenue piece, unrelated to the property tax abatement though, Clark County School District has a 3% utility tax, and this project's going to be a pretty substantial utility user. I can't give you the actual figure yet because the way that tax works, when it comes to energy, so electricity and natural gas, there's a partial exemption every year based on cost of production. It's kind of hard to figure out. So we don't know exactly what that number would be, but I can tell you the estimated new revenue to the school district from the plant, gross basis, for water and sewer, natural gas, and electricity before any energy exemption is about $258,000. So the pilot will hold you harmless on the property tax. You're going to be in the same net position you would have been in had the bonds not been issued on that front. But the school utility tax revenue is going to be new revenue to the school district. So certainly a net positive to the school district. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
This is Scott Heisel. Since you mentioned my name, I'll jump in here with a couple questions. So we talked about this as a concept 2 years ago, and you're talking about the same thing now, that we would stay in the same position. But I think it would be pretty important, certainly for us to be able to dive into the details and verify, certainly have Ms. Ellis verify that 21% number does in fact put us back in the same position.
I looked through his spreadsheet that Tim sent me, and the calculations all seem to flesh out that that's about what it comes out to. So, I mean, they're pretty accurate in trying to follow that SEEK formula of how that breaks down from the state, that ratio. It's a tricky formula.
Are we just in general supporting this concept, and can we get a copy of the spreadsheet later on before we have to do a final approval? Or is this essentially the final approval if we authorize the signing of this letter by the superintendent?
This will be the only approval. It's really just an acknowledgement, not so much an approval. But obviously, we want to be as open and answer any questions you have. If you want me to come back to another meeting and answer further questions, I'm happy to. I will say that this methodology, we do this, we've done a lot of these projects, and I can give you some examples. They don't seem to make the paper because people don't find industrial revenue bonds very interesting, but the methodology is the same, at least the formula is, and the Kentucky Department of Education has reviewed those calculations, been part of that in the past in other counties. So it's, I'm not concerned at all about the methodology, but I do want to make sure that all the members of the board are comfortable that you will be in the same position on the property tax side of things that you would have been in without the bonds.
So right now, the entity that owns that property, I think it's called Store Capital Acquisitions. I believe they paid about $190,000 last year in property tax. Will that continue, or will that be somehow wiped away by this new investment? How will that dynamic work?
That will be abated. So from a timing standpoint, the reason for change in the value of the property is that Danimer purchased the property in late 2018. And so the purchase price changed the assessed value. And that's what's generating that current tax revenue. They then did a financing with Store Capital where Store Capital owns it, but that will come out of the property tax base as part of the issuance of the bond. So the calculation, that 21%, because whatever's there currently will come out, you will get an increase in SEEK funding associated with that. And then the additional expenditures associated with the improvements are not in there currently, but the tax on those will be abated once they're completed.
Since we're potentially talking about, waiving $150,000 goodbye on one side, certainly I would feel more comfortable if we could actually see the flow itself, because I wouldn't describe that as a trivial amount of money, especially for whatever the length, the length of the abatement is. Is that a 10, 15, 20 year or
It's a 30-year.
30-year abatement? Now that's just my standpoint. I feel like I've jumped in front of some other members. I apologize. So I'll be quiet here a second, let other people talk.
So Tim, you mentioned that this is this more of a courtesy that you're letting us know? This sounds like the wheels have been in motion for some time. Doesn't sound like we have much, we don't have anything to really vote on. It's more of a courtesy of letting us know what's going on and asking us to send the superintendent send the letter that we support it.
That's correct. But obviously, while you're not part of the bond issuance process and you're not part of the approval process, everyone wants to make sure the school district understands it and is fine with it. So in that respect, it's not an approval, but I'm here to answer any questions and spend as much time with the board and going through the calculations as you need to get comfortable with them.
So what if and I'm just going to play devil's advocate for a second. What if your calculations is incorrect and we lose money from the property tax and instead of, being a net even, so to speak? Is there any recourse to that?
Not on the percentage. The rate changes every year. So, if you raise your property tax rate 10%, the pilot payment is going to go up 10%. Because that rate change goes into the calculation. The SEEK formula itself is fixed, at least as far as your current SEEK position. And I'm comfortable with the numbers, but I'm not sure how you address that other than looking at the numbers and making sure that the school board is comfortable as well.
Now, Alicia, you're comfortable with those numbers?
I am in looking at how he calculated it, and I will say this is actually a far better deal on this industrial revenue bond than the one that has been done in prior years with another company that they just gave us a flat amount for 20 years. It does not fluctuate with our tax rate. So at least this one will fluctuate with our tax rate.
Thank you.
I will add, I think it's always great whenever we can work with the city and the residents of Winchester on doing something like this, and I think potentially you have to look, I'm not sure what kind of employees that you're looking at, but potentially you maybe 50 to 100 new families moving into the area who will be paying property taxes as well. I'm not real familiar with the company and what that would be, but potentially it could be a lot more for our school system.
And just to add to that, the number of jobs for this project are 118 new full-time jobs, high paying as well.
I was going to ask, what kind of jobs are they? Manual labor, or are they technical, or what kind of job?
It's across the board. There's management, quite a bit of management. There's engineering jobs, and then there's the line workers. But and I wish I don't have it in front of me, but the average wage per hour is very substantial. The bonds were critical in getting the company to locate in Winchester. We were fighting a couple other locations in other states, including where their headquarters is in Georgia. So it was critical for them to get them here to have this industrial revenue bond financing. And one thing I'll mention to think about from the bond standpoint, when a company makes this large of an investment, yes, you are giving up some revenue in the early years, but they're a long-time citizen after they made the investment. They're not going anywhere. So in the long haul, kind of like Toyota, it's a great deal for the state to bring these jobs into your community and get the project here.
Thank you.
I just have one quick question. Is 30 years a typical time frame?
Yes,
Okay.
that was the maximum. They just raised it to 40, but all the bonds we work on are 30. Pretty standard. And again, I give you examples of those. We've done a bunch around. In fact, Churchill Downs, all of Churchill Downs is in a bond issue that was issued back in 2000. The Woodford Reserve Distillery, that's a 30-year bond issue, and all those warehouses they're building over there as well. Those are incremental bonds being issued for those as well, 30 years. Got some solar projects in Harrison County, solar generating stations. Those are 30 years. We just did one in the city of Paris for Hunt Brothers Pizza. A number of them down in Simpson County. They've got a lot of manufacturers down there. Nucor Steel, the big steel plant going into Meade County. They have a 40-year bond issue they're doing on that plant. So it's pretty common.
Well, I will say we've lost 2 employees to Danimer, and they are high-paying jobs. So that's good to see Clark County get that kind of a job come in to our community.
So this is Scott. So, maybe I'm the outlier on it, but just based upon the current investment they have, again, $150,000 forgiven times 30 years, we would potentially be making a $4.5 million decision that we're going to definitively give away at a minimum, give or take, because we've got the largest portion of the property tax. We'll be giving away those taxes. I just think it behooves us to take a look at the numbers and just triple check them, because it is such a huge amount, and potentially we could accomplish that between now and the special meeting that we've got. Don't we have another coming up here in a couple of days, like in 2 days? And maybe that would be a good balance between helping to move the project forward, but just making sure that, certainly I don't want to dispute what you've gone through, Mrs. Ellis. I respect that 100%. It's a big number. I just thought it'd behoove us to triple check it. That again is just my perspective.
So, Ms. Ritchie, all we're doing is acknowledging it. Are we taking a vote on item 3?
No, that's what I was trying to get back on. Yes, you're just acknowledging it. Discussion and acknowledgement.
Okay.
Paul, that's all you needed, right?
I just, yeah, if you acknowledge that, I'd like you to look at the letter, the sample letter there that I'm being asked to sign and make sure that you're all okay. And Brian, you're all right with going forward with that if this is what you, direction you go.
Well, if
Are you talking
you're,
to me, Paul?
sorry,
Well-
if Paul, it sounds like you are going, then that sounds like you do need a motion on it. Brian, is that right?
Well, I think the way it's on the agenda, I think, is it's just to acknowledge.
Right.
And I think that Mr. Effler would tell you that basically all we're doing is, they've already reached an agreement with the city. Is that right, Mr. Effler?
That's correct.
And so really all you're needing us to do is acknowledge that bond issue that you've already worked out with the city, and you basically just saying, this is the way we're going to calculate your money.
That's right. But it's important to the city that we have that letter because they want to make sure that we have explained it to you and, that it's been disclosed. They certainly don't want to do something without the school district knowing about it. But as far as actual approval, that's not necessary.
No, because your agreement is with the city of Winchester and that taxing authority. And all you're doing is saying, this is our deal with the city of Winchester, and we want to explain to you how it's going to impact you.
That's correct.
I'm sorry. Are you
So in that
saying that
case, all we need to do is just put a note, acknowledge that that's been there, let Paul execute that document with that acknowledgement.
So, Mr. Thomas, are you saying that you read this letter to say that we're just acknowledging that they're doing a 21% deal with the city of Winchester, and that we're not, by agreeing to the signing of this letter by Mr. Christie, offering them a 21% discount, a 21% payment? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, the way I understand the bonding and what we have done is the bonding release or relief that they are getting is through an agreement with the city of Winchester. And that was part of the incentive, was it not, Mr. Effler, to get you all there for this expansion?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, there may be some misunderstanding based on the wording of the letter. I do need to correct one thing. It says there that the district and Danimer have negotiated and agreed. That should be the city and Danimer have negotiated and agreed. The school districts don't approve these. I mean, cities can do them without anyone's approval, and so can counties. But that being said, it's definitely local policy and good policy to not just do that without talking to the school district about it. And that's the
Right. This is nothing more, Mr. Effler, I didn't mean to interrupt, but this is nothing more than just a common courtesy to say, we wanted you to know we've got this. Here's how it's going to impact you. Here are the terms that we've agreed upon. So it's really just an acknowledgement, Scott, of they've already negotiated the terms. He just, out of trying to be a nice guy, and Mr. Effler is, he's just saying, look, we just want you to know here's how it's going to impact you.
So, yeah, that does make a big difference in this letter to replace the word district with city. And so what you all are saying is that essentially, because of the powers that the city has in pulling this off the rolls, and I'm probably not using that correctly, they're the ones really driving the train on this, and we're just acknowledging that they've done that. So if any of our constituents have a problem, we need to tell them to go back to the city on this.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the city absolutely controls all the terms of the bond issue, including the pilot.
I have one follow-up question. The term pilot in this agreement, the pilot in my terms is a trial. It's a trial basis. Is that what that refers to in this?
No, I'm sorry. It's actually a payment in lieu of tax. So because the project assets are not on the tax roll, they're not subject to tax, they're abated, but the company is contractually agreeing to make a payment in lieu of those taxes.
Okay. Thanks for clarification.
Okay, so now everybody's on the same page that we are just acknowledging, and everybody's okay with that.
If that's your direction, then tomorrow I'll get the letter out with the change from changing the word district to city in the second paragraph. I'll make that change before it's sent out.
Just for fun, could you share the spreadsheet with all the board too?
I don't mind doing that.
Mr. Epler did give me permission to send that on to the board, so I will send that after this meeting for you all just to the board members.
Thank you.
Okay. So then we are moving on to item number
you.
4. Thank you. Item number 4, consider adoption of the 2020-2021 tentative budget. Paul Christie.
I'm going to ask Alicia if she'll go through a quick overview of the budget. You should have received a copy of everything. She's going to hit some highlights that we can talk about if we need to from that point.
All right, everybody. I am going to, hopefully you've had a chance to review the PowerPoint presentation that was in the packet, and I'm going to skip to slide 6 to start us off and just point out with the estimation of SEEK this year and all the COVID-19 pandemic that we have been in, KDE all districts were given the option to either go with their 2018-19 year-end information or their 19-20. I don't believe any district went with 19-20 because of the number of days that we have not transported students is 40 plus days at this point, and that will be a huge factor in that transportation piece of SEEK. So Clark County has chosen to use the 18-19 end of year numbers going forward. And so that slide just kind of points that out. I just wanted to make sure that that is what we understood was occurring, and that is how the forecast SEEK, which you were also given a copy of, it was published by KDE on April 3rd, of what we will start the school year with. July, August, and September payments will be based on that forecast. Now, come the tentative that is posted anywhere in September, it just depends on when everybody gets their data in and KDE gets it all published. That tentative will take into account growth factors. So we do hopefully foresee that we are still on that trend that we were projecting this year and next year of having that growth, and that COVID has not changed that too much for Clark County. But again, that is, it's hard to predict that right now in the middle of what we are in. But we hope to see with the tentative posting of our SEEK that might go up compared to what this forecast is. And based on that and what we had projected in the draft and what this forecast is, we are seeing that SEEK is going to decrease about $179,000. So that has been accounted for in the budget. The next slide is just an overview of kind of the other revenues that have changed from the draft level. I did speak with Jason Neely in the PBA office, and he said we were pretty spot on at projecting the 1.5% increase in property values. He was looking at anywhere from 1.5 to 2%. So he said that was a safe estimate. So those numbers are exactly the same in the tentative that they were in the draft. That did not change. Also, what we put in the draft was projecting that we would take that 4% tax revenue increase. Again, this is an estimation. So we're estimating that tax rate will be 65 cents versus our current rate of 63.7 cents. But again, those actual tax reports that show us what KDE calculates with their formula to the penny should be out the first week of August, typically. Jason said he is going to try to make sure his tax rolls are submitted by the August 3rd deadline. So we should, and my report gets submitted by July 25th. And by law, KDE is supposed to have those reports to us 3 days after both parties submit. So we should have them that first week of August. And then
Alicia,
yes, go ahead.
let me add here, I did speak today with Sheriff Perdue. The collection rate this year, as it ended, was just under 99%. And even after the deadline, there were some additional ones that have come in. So He feels solid that this year's collection is at 99%. And at this point is not foreseeing a problem with, the same type of collection this next year.
And then just to finish, you can see on that slide, other revenue changed. Due to the tight constraints of everybody's budget, the city of Winchester is not going to be able to give us currently in their budget, the $7,500 that we had originally asked them for our community ed program that they've given us every year. They said that might change come December with better discussions, but as of right now, that is not in their budget for us. And then indirect costs, we had that conversation last week in regards to food service. We do have 2 payroll MOAs with KDE, so that will bring us about $3,100 in indirect costs that they budget with that service. So those are the revenue changes from the draft level. And then the next slide just points out beginning balance, which is how we always have calculated that. And it has served me well in my time here at Clark County so far in doing that projection of the historical averages and worst case scenario and kind of budgeting in the middle. That has always fallen very close to the beginning balance for the next year. So that's kind of the synopsis of revenues. Is there any questions?
I've got a couple questions on revenues whenever it's my turn. Okay, I'll jump in then.
Go ahead, Scott.
Okay, thank you. On the revenue projections, I was taking a look at this year's year-to-date collections, and we're currently sitting at about 93% on this is the general tax revenue. Mm-hmm. And last year at the same time, we were at 99%. And it has me pretty concerned that if the sheriff says we've got 99% collected, but what we've brought in so far compared to our budget is only 93%, it makes me concerned that perhaps our budget number is high for this year. And and then of course that would cascade into next year. And those are both, give or take, $800,000 issues.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, if we were truly, if we weren't going to get much more in, then we'd have a pretty sizable shortage for this year.
We are a month behind in collections, so we don't have the final, if he's saying 99%, we do not have the final check from him. I'm not sure how much that is going to be. But also in relation to the percentage of budget for last year and the percentage of budget this year, we changed how we budgeted this year. We only did a 2% discount budgeting this year, whereas in years past, we've only budgeted 93% collection. Well, this year we budgeted 98% collection because we have historically been bringing in that 97, 98% collection. And so we upped the budget this year in regards to that. So that's why the percentages from this time last year seem so much higher than they do this year.
Well, if I'm following it correctly, then obviously the point that concerns me is that when we finish this year here in 2 months, that essentially what we've collected so far for the first 10 months is where we're going to finish up. And that's substantially below the budgeted number. And the budgeted number for this year essentially is the basis for the budgeted number next year plus 4%. So that's what I'm worried about is we'll have a real shortfall for this year. My other concern is about the beginning balance. I took the 10 months actual and then I laid on top of that the actual revenue and expense numbers for March and for May and June of last year to try to give sort of an estimate of coming after it from that direction on what I think the final year in balance would be. And that's by doing it that way, we would end up with about 6.3 million as the ending balance and not the assumed 9.5 million.
That is a different way of going about it, but if I mean, there's multiple ways you could go about it. I've stuck with the method that has served me well, but if the board would like to change that, you are more than welcome to do so.
Do you remember about how far the estimate and the actual was off for last year?
We estimated 10 million and we started the year, just one moment, sir. We started the year with 10,070,780, so it was all 7,780.
I guess then I was looking at the wrong thing. I thought it was a $2 million difference, was what was reflected in the final audit, but maybe I need to pull that back out.
The draft budget did have a $12 million beginning budget, but when we presented the tentative budget and then also into the working budget, we were at 10 million.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody else have any questions?
Okay, we'll move on to expenditures. That's starting with slide number 11. And Paul, you can jump in at any time, but basically the next couple slides are an overview of what you saw in the draft budget presentation. I just wanted to put that back in front of you of what we had put in the draft budget and what it was for exactly. And then after some conversations, what we've pulled back out that we didn't deem for this budget cycle that we were going to try to work within the budgets we had, and then kind of priorities for the 2022 school year. So just to highlight that real quickly, originally in the draft, we had added 1.1 million. We've pulled back out 397,000. And if you glance through there, the big items we pulled back out were the new phone system with technology. I sat down with, well, I didn't sit down. Justin and I emailed and talked on the phone. But we discussed that we could get through this next school year with our current phone system, but this would be a #1 priority for our 2022 budget. So that will be added in the 2022 budget for sure. The Baker furniture, we pulled that back out just simply for the fact that you all were presented with a whole furniture list for the entire district, and that will be discussed again at the Thursday meeting in its entirety. So to have one school with money in the budget for furniture didn't seem right that you all would have to discuss that as the whole. So we pulled that back off. The custodial, we removed that 30,000 for equipment. We're going to try to work within the budget that was already existing on that. And then with transportation and maintenance, that's the next slide over. Originally, we had talked about the budgeting of vehicles, and so just trying to work within the budget and not increase our budgets too substantially. We've pulled off one vehicle from each department, essentially, a budget for that. And then within transportation, that was a typing in the budget for the draft. That 24,000 for the cellular service was actually included in that 270,000 cost for the cameras. So it was kind of a double budgeted item that I missed, and so we pulled that back off. So those are the expenditures that we had discussed at the draft level, and this is kind of where we're at now with the tentative level.
If you look also, you'll see the emergency situations where they're talking about that at the 67,000. Know that the budget for maintenance and transportation has not exceeded where that it was. So those numbers could come off if you felt they needed to, but those were left, and which left both of those budgets at what they were the last time. So that's an area that could be a savings if you didn't want to leave that. We just left it in for an emergency, in case of an emergency, repairs on something. But it had to come through central office approval before anything like that could be spent. But that is another area. But again, I want to mention that even with that in there, their budget was not increased in the maintenance area.
So a question in the technology area that was pulled out of the budget. I understand the phone system. Was there, it looks like a $39,000 contract was, we're not going to renew or sign, I guess. Is that correct? And if it is, does that leave us or leave the district vulnerable if something happens to the network?
No, the only item of those three being pulled out of the budget is the 160. The 65 for the network upgrades and the 39 for that network contract are still in the budget.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay.
Yes. So those were the three big items asked for at the draft level, and the only one at this level that's been pulled out is the phone system.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody have any more questions on that?
Are we to page 13 or are we not that far into it yet?
I'm ready to start there if everyone else is.
Okay, I'll wait then. Thank you.
Okay. So 13, nothing changed. That is just a complete summary of what you saw at the draft level. I just wanted to put that back in front of you to then tell you the changes that have occurred since the draft to the tentative. So 13 is a summary. That's what we did at the draft level from our current budget. Now 14, I just kind of gave a quick synopsis of, we actually, with legislation this year, they froze the classified retirement rate at our current rate of 24.06 for 1 year. So we will get to keep that rate next year instead of going up to 26.95% that we had originally thought was going to occur and was budgeted at the draft level. So there is a savings there on all of our classified staff. And then we've also had to, based on the allocation that was approved in May, we had to add 6 teachers and 4 kindergarten IAs based on our projected enrollment. And due to the need of 2 specific students within our special education department, we kept 2 instructional assistants on the budget to follow those children. So based on all of those changes right there, we've added $307,492 back to the payroll and benefits budget from the draft level. So that's the summary of how salaries and benefits have changed.
Mr. Christie, quick question, and this, I mean, it kind of falls through follows this and kind of doesn't, but I was reading an article online today about a lot of teachers not planning on coming back in the fall in general, not this district, just in general. Have you got any insight to that?
No, and Scarlett's on here and she might could speak to that, but no, I'm not aware of any, other than what we would say are our normal retirements. And I don't think that's way above what it would normally be. We've lost a few teachers to go back home, those types of things, but I'm not aware of any major change in employment of the teachers here. So we're holding off on a lot of employment on these people to bring back with grant stuff. We're waiting till we actually have money in hand before we're doing that. So we're holding back as much as we can. I've got a thing today that a conference call with the health people and the commissioner that I'm going to forward you guys so that you all can watch it and see some of the things that we're going to be dealing with that we've not been dealing with in the past. It's going to be different, and what possible schedules could look like and what possible requirements for those type things look like. It's going to change a lot of things in the way we do teaching, and some of the proposal that was being made today by the health folks, I have not even had a chance to sit down with Becky, and we've not even met as a staff with it. It wasn't over till about 4:30 today, but I could see some possible changes in food services and some things that we're going to have to do there. But I think that's where we're going to have to look at this GEARS money and the CARES Act money there to work from, to do some things there. And I'm hopeful, and it sounds like through some of the stuff today that there could be some additional funding come to help with some of that stuff. But I'm not aware of any, and Scarlett can chime in if she is, but I'm not aware of any big major changes in employment of our teachers on staff here.
I am not aware of, can you hear me? Can you hear me? I'm not aware of it. The changes that I see, unfortunately, are just like every year. They hop from Madison to Fayette, just depending on where they live, and a little bit of an increase in pay if they go to Fayette. The rest, I'm not seeing a lot of people leaving us. I've got a couple people that are going out of state, but that's understandable. Their husband's been hired or their wife's been hired somewhere else. And our staff is, right now we've made 7 potential hires in certified. And that's strictly people that are either going next door or their life situation has changed and they're needing to move to another location. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
I have a question. If we adopt the agenda, would we have room in there to add any Chromebooks? Or if this coronavirus does come back in the fall, like they are thinking it might, and where do we stand on having Chromebooks per child?
We're going to come back to you at the, and I'll talk with Dustin. I don't have the agenda in front of me. I was thinking it was on, no, it's just summer work projects. We have the plan put together for the increase in Chromebooks, taking into consideration what we already have in the district, and what it would take to get to a 1-to-1 from 3rd grade up. Justin and I have worked on that. He's put the plan for that together, and he'll be presenting that, and that'll come to you at the next meeting.
Great, thank you.
There is, I'm sorry, there is the potential there to help for some help with that. Some of this COVID money that we're talking about, the 1.5 that we've got coming in, some of that can be used toward technology is an acceptable use of that money. Just remember, you got at this particular point in time, you've got about, with the two together, you've got about 1.5 million, and we have until I think September 30th of 2022 to spend that. But you're looking, I think our price was somewhere, and I may be off here, but I'm thinking it was somewhere around, I want to say 275,000 or somewhere in there to work on the Chromebooks. That was part of the plan that'll be coming to you this next time.
Ms. Ellis, I had a question about page 13. The additional folks that are listed there, if we approve this budget as presented, does that imply that we've approve those positions, or will they come back to the board on an individual basis later?
Those positions would be budgeted, and we have job descriptions, and they've already been in place this year, so there's not, the physical therapist is the only one that would have to be job description, I believe, brought back, whereas how that has already been presented, I believe. So positions have already been presented. It's just if they're presented in the budget to start the school year with, and that is the board saying that they are okay to hire those for July 1. If I misspoke, someone please correct me. Scarlett, Paul.
I think you're correct.
I'm good with that.
Okay, so essentially they've already been approved in prior action, then, if I'm interpreting that correctly, or at least the ability to add those is already, the approval's already there. This is not, we're not approving something new.
New, no. These aren't new positions. They're already approved as far as job descriptions.
Can I ask another question? Alicia, on slide 11, we're taking out 30,000 from custodial. What, can you refresh my memory what that was for?
It was for additional equipment replacement, such as like the floor scrubbers and the different stuff that the custodians would need equipment wise. In the current budget we're sitting in, we had increased the supply budget to help with that kind of overlap of the board taking over the contract, but the school's paying the clicks. And so kind of supplies lines have gotten confused, and it seems the custodials were picking up more supplies. And so that was a request for, because he had used his equipment budget this year on supplies. So he was asking if that's going to be the case, he would like more equipment money for next year, but we're going to try to work within our budgets and with all the schools to kind of maintain that supply equipment budget that we have this year instead of increasing it for next year.
So will that be taking any funds away from them for cleaning, say, you know, with the corona, the extra cleaning techniques that we're using?
not for the Corona or that type. We're talking the pieces of equipment we're talking here, like she said, were floor scrubbers, waxers, those type things. Just pieces of equipment that we currently have, but just looking to upgrade or replace with newer models.
Okay, thank you.
If there ends up any other equipment that comes up that turns out to be of value to us in fighting this coronavirus, that's something that we would look at the COVID. Again, we can look at there to see. And at this point, I'm not aware of anything. I think we were kind of ahead of the game in these disinfectant guns that we call them, to, like you see on TV, where they're going in and doing these disinfectant things. We've got those in every school already. So we were kind of ahead of the game with some of this. Now, if there's something new that comes out that proves to be better, then we're going to need to look at that.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking that, Sherry. I had that same question. That one seemed like, with all this going on, take a lot out of the custodial budget.
And that's not taking money away from their current budget. That was adding money to them next year. So I just want to make sure we're not taking any current monies away from them. That's just next year's budget had been asked to be increased, and we're not going to increase it.
Then again, when you look at the transportation and maintenance, you see those emergency situations. In my mind, that's a place that if some piece of equipment comes out, that's just something that we have to have in fighting this virus. The 50,000 that you see there in transportation, the 67.4 that you see in emergency situations, in maintenance, those are areas that we could look for to do something there if something comes out that proves to be something that we have to have. That's why that was kind of left in there.
Thank you.
All right, so that's pretty much the large synopsis of general fund, unless there are any other specific questions.
Ms. Ellis, since we spoke a little while ago, I pulled up my packet from May of last year, and I think it was 12 million is what we had in May.
Okay, I apologize for misspeaking.
Well, and hopefully I looked at it correctly.
I don't have that pulled up in front of me right now, so.
Okay, thanks.
Ms. Ellis, are we going through some more of these slides? I've got a question on, I think it's slide 17. And it's just a question on the contingency estimate or the draft budget for next year and the tentative budget. Those are a little, they're a little different. There's also an increase from last year to 2021. Can you just talk about that line item and how we came up with those numbers?
Are you talking about the contingency line item only on that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the working budget is currently sitting at that 6.3. That is your contingency budget as of right now, because I pulled a current working budget to calculate this. So contingency is basically you take all your revenues that you started with, including your beginning balance, and we budget out all of those items above the 0100s through the 0900s, and then anything left over is what then makes up your contingency. So that 8.6 million sitting at the draft level and now the 7.8 million is basically, that's the number after the fact that is left in the budget that we didn't budget out in a line item per se. Does that make sense? Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, so those numbers don't have, there's nothing in those numbers that reflect a transfer of construction funds into the contingency fund that may anything that may close out next year in construction funds, that doesn't reflect that, right?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on general fund?
I think so.
Okay. So then, just kind of moving on in the rest of the packet, you'll see Fund 2 special revenue. We never budget anything in Fund 2 until we have gotten a confirmation of what that number is going to be. So as you're looking at that from our FY 2020, that's grants we have this year that we've booked. FY 21, you're going to see a lot of blanks, and that's not saying we're not going to get that grant. It's just saying we don't know the amount of that grant right now. We do foresee that most of these grants will be received again if we had them in the current year, but we just don't know what those amounts are at this time. So that's kind of, there's not much more to say on that unless you'll have any questions. Just kind of hitting all the funds just so you know kind of what's in the budget. Fund 22 is district activity accounts. And those are funds that are swept up from school activity accounts, and that is a Red Book item. You hear me say that word a lot, Red Book. It's rules dictated to us that we have to follow with those school activity accounts. And there are certain things that are deemed district activity, operational or instructional, that must be sent to the district to be spent. So that's what that fund is. Nothing gets budgeted in that until it is swept up to be used. We don't just create a budget to start with in that account. Fund 25 is going to be the big change that you see in the FY 21 budget cycle. There was a new accounting standard that has come out called GASB 84. I don't want to get into the weeds too much with this, but basically school activity accounts used to be considered fiduciary accounts, and we only accounted for them in our accounting methods at the audit. And we just put a page in the audit and had those numbers in it. You all don't monthly see that information. It's not monthly reported to you. But with GASB 84, that changed. And so now with that ruling, they have to become integrated into our accounting monthly. And so this is the first year, FY 2020, that all districts are trying to figure out exactly how they're going to account for that. There's not an exact ruling from KDE of how to handle it. They kind of left it up to each district. So our district this year for 2020 is just going to do one journal entry at the end of the year in June and close that out for this year and have it reported in our report. But starting with the July 1 school year, we are going to start a phased process of getting that into our Munis system. And so basically we're going to start with the 4 elementary schools in Baker, and we're going to phase them in first because those 5 schools have the least activity as far as transactions go within the school, because they're smaller and they don't have all the athletics going on in those schools. So we're going to start with them and we're going to bring them into our Munis system. So you're going to start seeing Fund 25 activity on your monthly reports that you get in the packet. So I wanted you all just to be aware of that going forward. GRC and RDC will continue to operate in the software system that is separate from Munis, and we will do journal entries to put that information in monthly until we phase them into Munis as well. So it's a lot of accounting codes set up, it's a lot of setup, so that's why we're doing it in phases. And part of that too is bringing the elementary and Baker, we're centralizing that to a person in central office to process deposits and checks. So the secretaries at the schools will still be responsible for doing requisitions and requesting the purchasing of those funds, and it will be used as exactly how it is now, that the principals and teachers need to use those monies, but the process will be going through Munis and someone in central office will be processing those now. And that's just part of all that's gone on in our district. We're trying to also help minimize that potential for fraud, getting that processing under one person versus 5 people. Any questions? I just threw a lot of information at you,
So will the secretaries at each one of the 5 schools be going to the central office on a daily, weekly basis, or just whenever they, collect checks? What's the process?
Yes, sir. So what we have done is we have actually purchased Dropbox type safes that will be locked and only I and the central office person who will be processing have access to. And so daily, that person will travel to each school and check to see if there's anything in that safe. Some days there may be nothing. Some days all schools might have something. It just depends on the field trip activity, fundraising activity that's going on in those locations. But that's part of the centralizing one person having access to the money versus 5 people having access to the money. So the teachers will still be doing what they're doing, filling out the forms, collecting the money from their kiddos, and they will go drop that in that safe instead of handing it to that secretary at the school.
Gotcha. Okay. It's good. That's good.
So we're still working out all the details. We don't have it all fine-tuned, but that's what we'll be working on this next month to start, the school year with come July.
Okay.
All right. If everyone's ready to move on. Okay. So getting into capital funds, we've got some good news there. The General Assembly actually increased how they budget the FSPK equalization match. So that is going to increase our capital funds. You will have seen that on that SEEK calculation you got. I'm skipping from 310. 310 is going to be based on, we're using our 1819 numbers. I got ahead of myself, so I apologize. 310 is ADA times $100. So since we're going with that 1819 number, you're looking at $465.662. That didn't roll off my tongue good. So that's where we stand on 310. 320 is the exciting news about the equalization. So that's based on our assessments. And so the big bucket of money from property tax that we come over, if you'll look at that SEEK calculation in front of you, it tells you based on, here's your property value, you have 2 nickels, you have to put this much money into your capital account. So you see almost 1.6 million on the FSPK in original growth that we have to put in based on property. But you'll see on the state equalization, we're going to get $540.617, $546.17. So that is up from current year $373,225. So that's exciting news. We're going to have some more capital monies rolling into us. So that's an increase of $334,000 alone just on those 2 equalization pieces in our capital funds.
And then Alicia, as we talked, that should take your bonding potential by July 1. You should be at about $11 million in bonding potential based on these numbers.
Correct. So that's exciting for our facilities plan going forward with what, negotiations of what we're going to get into with that committee. We're increasing our bonding potential there. Also on a side note that I'm waiting confirmation from KDE, which is why I didn't really put it on a slide, but part of that language in that whole SEEK calculation was also that there are 7 districts who have a growth nickel that were not equalized when we got that growth nickel, and we are one of those 7. So they have added language in there that we will get 25% equalization on that growth nickel. So if our equalization is that 540, we're looking at another 135,000 in capital funds for a 25% equalization. So that's exciting. I foresee that will be on our tentative SEEK reflected, whereas it's not reflected right now, but I haven't gotten complete confirmation from KDE on that. But it was in a commissioner's update that they talked about that for those 7 districts. And so those capital funds then drive our 400 account, which is our debt service account. So just overview, there's a listing of the bonds that we currently have. Our debt service in principal and interest for next year is a little bit over $4.1 million. And all of that will be covered out of our building fund this year. Whereas normally we have to take both capital outlay and building fund to fund that. All of it will be funded out of building fund. And so you have all of your capital funds and a little excess out of building fund. left over that can be used on some other projects. You can commit it to a BG project. You can use it on some maintenance where we've done those capital funds requests and brought money back to general fund. We're going to have almost 639,000 available for that next year.
Ms. Ellis, can I ask a question?
Yes, absolutely.
The payment on the $8 million in energy bonds that we did a couple years ago, I'm assuming that's built into the budget to make those payments, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Those payments are in there. Mm-hmm. All right, last fund is Fund 51. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut anybody off.
No, I wasn't gonna say anything. I was just making sure we were good.
Oh, okay, thank you. All right, so last fund is Fund 51. And you see that synopsis there. I just want to point out we have changed from the draft level just due to the whole COVID pandemic situation. We sat down and reevaluated based on what we thought those losses this year would be, and then projection of next year based on right now how we're being told we have to open back up for the whole COVID situation. So that's just kind of a summary there. So their budget is substantially different from what we thought at the draft level. But again, until everything plays out with this whole situation, we're just kind of all doing the best we can. Any questions on the tentative budget? That's all I've got for you.
Questions, comments?
I've got a comment whenever it's my turn.
Go ahead, Scott.
Okay. Mrs. Ellis, I appreciate all the hard work you've done on this budget, and it's just incredible, all the complexities that makes up these numbers. And I'll probably be voting for the budget. Just as a side, I'm concerned that the starting contingency numbers, it might be up to $3 million off, and if the revenue number doesn't come in, that might add another $800,000 to drive our ending contingency next year from $8 million, maybe somewhere down to the $4 to $5 million range. But those are just estimates on my part, kind of like you also have estimates. I just wanted to make a note that that the impact of those assumptions can have a pretty big impact on how much money we think we're going to have in our contingency funds. But again, I thank you for all the hard work you've done on this budget.
Anybody else have any comments they'd like to add? If not, would anybody like to make a motion?
I make a motion to adopt the 2020-21 tentative budget.
Motion by Mr. Tawby,
I'll second.
second by Ms. Richardson. District 1,
Yes.
District 2,
Yes.
District 3.
No.
Did you say no? I'm sorry, it cut out.
Yes, I said no.
Okay, thank you. District 4,
Yes.
motion passes 4 to 1. Okay. Item number 5, consider approval of the 2020-2021 school activity fund budget.
Alicia, you want to field any questions?
I'm trying to get my mic under. Sorry about that. This is something that is required by Red Book that we present to you every year. This is basically their summaries at the school activity level of what they think their beginning balance based on the end of this year and then their activities next year, what they think they will be doing. All of these are included in the budget that I just presented to you in Fund 25, but these are the individual budgets per school that is required by Red Book.
Any questions, comments?
So if I'm looking at Campbell, and it looks like they have an $80,000 balance going into next year. Am I reading that correct?
Let me get that pulled up. I'm sorry, I don't have them all in front of me.
And I'm just wondering if that's, that's normal, if that's, that's high. It looks like Baker might have like an $18,000, close to $19,000 balance.
So yes, Campbell does have the 80,000. Remember, they have all the sports in their budget, whereas Baker does not have that. So that's the difference in what I spoke of earlier of elementary and Baker. They don't have as many activities at that level. Baker obviously has more clubs and that kind of stuff than elementaries have, but they don't have all those sports teams that RDC has. And RDC at the middle school level is what they're still considered under Red Book. They don't have booster clubs. So the high school has booster clubs. Middle school does not have booster clubs. So all that sports money is ran through the school at the middle school level, or junior high in our case.
Okay. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
I have a question. On that same budget there, looking at the athletic line that has like $9,000 in there, what does that include? Because then you go on down through there and you see the other athletics listed separately, like basketball, football, cheerleading, dance team, baseball, soccer. So what does that?
The bulk of that would be their gate receipts. Like, that doesn't go to a particular sport. That goes in the overall athletic account. And then it's kind of divvied out. And Dustin, please correct me if I am speaking incorrectly for your school, but that's my understanding of how that account works, is that your gate monies, and then you divvy that out to help with the uniform rotation. And I think that is similar to how the high school functions as well on that.
Yes, I saw that on both of them. So that answers my question. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
Any more questions or comments? Would anybody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the 2020, 2021 school activity fund budgets as presented.
Motion by Mr. Heisel,
I'll second.
second by Mr. Tobey. District 1,
Yes.
District 2,
Yes.
District 3,
Yes.
District 4.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. Okay, guys. If that is everything, I will make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All right. District 1,
Yes.
District 2,
Yes.
District 3,
Yes.
District 4.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0, and we are adjourned at 7:57.
How are we doing Thursdays?
It's same way.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
Alicia, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
See you all Thursday.